Hello, how are you? I'm Roy. Thanks for coming to the channel. So today we're talking about desserts and sweet flavors. Do you like desserts?
Yeah, I do. I have a huge sweet tooth. I try not to eat them too often, but I can't really say no to cake or chocolate.
Here's something wild. Studies show we spend nearly $100 billion globally on desserts each year. But research indicates that 85% of people feel guilty immediately after indulging in them.
Those numbers are fascinating, especially when you consider how deeply embedded desserts are in nearly every culture's traditions and celebrations.
You know what's really interesting about that? Anthropologists have found that humans have been making specialized sweet foods for at least 8,000 years, long before we had modern sugar refinement.
That makes sense when you think about how our brains are literally wired to seek out sweet flavors. It's one of our oldest survival mechanisms.
Speaking of which, recent neuroscience studies have shown that sugar activates the same reward pathways in our brains as certain addictive substances. The dopamine release from eating dessert can be up to 200% above baseline levels.
Hold on. Are you saying that chocolate cake is basically like a drug?
Well, not exactly, but the neurological response patterns are surprisingly similar. And here's where it gets really interesting. Studies show that just looking at pictures of desserts can trigger up to 30% of that same dopamine response.
That certainly explains why I can't scroll past a good dessert video on social media without getting immediate cravings.
And that's actually created this fascinating economic phenomenon. The global dessert photography market, just the photography part, is now worth over $2 billion annually.
The way social media has transformed our relationship with desserts is really something to think about. These aren't just treats anymore, they're content.
Exactly right. And it's affecting real world behavior too. Research shows that 73% of millennials will choose a restaurant or cafe based primarily on how Instagrammable their desserts look.
That's incredible. We're literally eating with our eyes first, through our phones.
And speaking of eating with our eyes, let's talk about pricing psychology. Studies show people are willing to pay up to 40% more for a dessert if it's visually appealing, regardless of taste.
That explains the whole macaron phenomenon. Those little cookies that can cost upwards of $4 each.
It's fascinating you mentioned macarons because they're actually a perfect case study in modern dessert economics. The ingredients cost about 25 cents per cookie, but the perceived value has skyrocketed due to social media influence.
You know what's really interesting about that? The history of macarons actually mirrors our modern dessert culture in a way. They were originally created as luxury items for French royalty.
And now we're all playing at royalty with our $4 cookies. But here's what's really fascinating. Studies show that the more expensive a dessert is, the more people report enjoying it, even in blind taste tests.
That's wild. So we're literally paying for the experience of thinking something tastes better?
Precisely. And it goes even deeper. Research indicates that sharing expensive desserts on social media gives people a dopamine hit that's actually stronger than eating the dessert itself.
The psychology behind all of this is really something. We're not just consuming sugar, we're consuming status, experiences, and social validation.
And that's having real health implications. Studies show that while overall sugar consumption has decreased by 15% in the past decade, dessert specific sugar consumption has increased by 23%.
That seems counterintuitive. Why would dessert sugar be going up while overall sugar is going down?
Well, researchers believe it's because people are making a psychological distinction between everyday sugar and what they call experience sugar. They're cutting back on sugary drinks and snacks, but saving their sugar allowance for these special, photogenic dessert moments.
That actually makes a lot of sense when you think about how we've elevated desserts to almost event status.
And speaking of events, let's talk about the rise of dessert specific celebrations. The number of dessert focused festivals worldwide has increased by 300% in the last 5 years.
These aren't just food events anymore. They're full-on cultural phenomena.
Exactly. And they're changing how we think about dessert on a fundamental level. Recent surveys show that 62% of people now consider dessert a necessary luxury rather than just a treat.
That shift in perspective really explains a lot about current consumer behavior around sweets.
It does, and it's affecting the industry in surprising ways. For instance, the fastest growing segment of the dessert market isn't traditional sweets. It's actually health modified desserts.
You mean like those black bean brownies and avocado chocolate mousse?
Precisely. The healthy dessert market has grown by 156% since 2019, even though nutritionists say most of these alternatives aren't significantly healthier than traditional desserts.
So we're basically paying more for the illusion of health?
In many cases, yes. But here's what's fascinating. Studies show that people who eat healthy desserts actually tend to consume more calories overall because they feel less guilt about indulging.
That's such a perfect example of how our psychology around desserts can actually work against us.
And it ties into something even more interesting. Research shows that cultures with less guilt around dessert consumption actually have lower rates of obesity.
That seems completely counterintuitive. How does that work?
It appears to be related to something psychologists call the restriction binge cycle. When we view desserts as forbidden, we're more likely to overindulge when we do have them.
So all our guilt and anxiety around desserts might actually be making our relationship with them worse?
The data certainly suggests that. And here's something even more interesting. Studies of children's eating habits show that kids who are allowed regular, moderate access to desserts develop better self-regulation skills around sweet foods.
That really challenges the conventional wisdom about strict dessert rules for kids.
It does, and it's leading to some fascinating changes in how nutritionists approach dietary advice. The new thinking is that we need to focus less on restriction and more on building a healthy psychological relationship with all foods, including desserts.
That sounds like a much more sustainable approach than the all or nothing thinking we've had in the past.
And it's showing results. Communities that have adopted this more balanced approach have seen a 25% reduction in disordered eating behaviors related to sweets.
These findings really make you think about how much of our dessert behavior is driven by psychology rather than actual hunger or craving.
Absolutely right. And that brings us to perhaps the most interesting finding of all. Studies show that people who give themselves unconditional permission to eat dessert actually end up eating less of it over time.
That's such a powerful argument for changing how we think about these foods.
It really is. And as we wrap up, I think that's the key takeaway. Our relationship with desserts isn't just about sugar and calories, it's about psychology, culture, and how we view pleasure itself.
Looking ahead, it seems like we might be moving toward a more balanced, less guilt ridden approach to desserts.
And that might just be the sweetest development of all.
Yeah, maybe we don't need to be so hard on ourselves about desserts.
True. Enjoying something sweet once in a while isn't such a bad thing.
Thanks for listening to today's English conversation. If you enjoyed this short, natural dialogue, try listening again and repeating the lines out loud. Daily practice, even for just a few minutes, really helps improve your English.
See you in the next lesson. Bye bye.